Get ready to dive into the unbelievable story behind one of the most daring financial frauds ever recorded in history. It was one of the biggest and one of the most historical financial fraud stories. It was a complicated conspiracy that was all about a hijack and murder. Let's dive deeply into this story of audacious financial frauds in history. It has become clear that David Mockett uncovered one of the most profitable maritime frauds in history. He was killed by a bomb specifically designed for him, targeting him alone in a deliberate act of assassination. This is the story of an oil tanker that was attacked and burned, initially believed to be a piracy incident. However, it turned out to be something much darker and more bizarre than anyone could have imagined. According to one of the authors of Dead in the Water, Kit Chelel, my presumption was that everything gets cleaned up and the days of Pirates of the Caribbean are long gone. However, the more we investigated this one ship's history, the more illegal activity we discovered. To be honest, this story made clear how uncontrolled and dishonest the international shipping business can be. Kit Chelel is a senior writer, and he, with other two writers, Bloomberg and Matthew Campbell, are the authors of Dead in the Water. Brillante Virtuoso was an oil tanker and container ship that was used for international trade. This oil tanker was used to transport a huge amount of oil from one port to another over the years. Brillante was a huge ship. It was a 275-meter-long vessel, and you can compare it with almost 3 football fields. Brillante Virtuoso suffered fire damage on July 5, 2011, consequent to a claimed hijacking event that occurred in the Gulf of Aden. The incidents led to a claim on the war risks policy of the vessel made by Piraeus Bank AE, the vessel's mortgagee, and Suez Fortune Investments Limited, on the grounds that the vessel was a constructive complete loss. But what really happened with this huge oil tanker? On July 5, 2011, the Brillante Virtuoso, carrying a cargo of fuel oil, was traveling out into the Gulf of Aden after passing through the Suez Canal on its way from Ukraine to China. Presently, Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, lies to the south, while Yemen to the north is separated by the Gulf of Aden. During the summer of 2011, when this expedition took place, piracy was at its peak. From June 23rd to July 5th, there have been around 12 pirate attacks committed. A small, swift boat with 7 or 8 AK-47 wielding men used to approach these enormous cargo ships that carried loads valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. They generally force their way inside, seize possession of the ship, and then return to Somalia with the cargo ship while demanding a ransom of millions of dollars. Any sailors on such a ship would have understood that they were approaching an area where, should pirates manage to board, both they and their ship might be taken captive and maybe transported to Somalia, where they could be held for ransom for months or even years, which is why additional security precautions were implemented. As a result of this, the authority of Brillante Virtuoso requests an extra bit of security. It is a security detail that has to go with the ship through the Gulf of Aden. The group prepares a panic room and sets up common deterrents like hoses, razor wire, and high press. The ship's owners set up a security squad to guide them through the riskiest portion of the voyage. That evening, while they wait for their security detail to board, the captain of the brilliant Virtuoso, Noah Gonzaga, instructs the crew to turn off the engine and drift. They are in calm, partly overcast weather, 12 nautical miles off the coast of Yemen. At midnight, the personnel on watch of the ship spotted a small boat with the help of a reader. At first, they had no idea what was going on or what was going to happen, but all of them were terrified. When the small boat came near to them, they asked them to shout down using a loudspeaker. But the guys on the small boat replied that they were security detail and asked them to lower the ladder and help them to come aboard. A group of 6 guys board the vessel. They are armed, donning hospital masks and headscarves, and ask for ID. They insist on being brought to the captain and won't accept his radio. The tanker's captain is in his stateroom. The gunmen instruct the team to assemble in the television room as Marquez shows up at his door with one of the armed guys. After that, They were essentially left in the dark for the next several hours, simply listening and waiting while fearing the worst. The worst thing they could have imagined was being hijacked to Somalia and imprisoned there while they awaited payment of a ransom. The ship began to move when a loud explosion erupted, sending thick smoke into the TV room where the crew had gathered. As they emerged, they discovered that the armed men had vanished, leaving the Brillante Virtuoso behind. The fire rapidly spiraled out of control, forcing the crew to rush to the top of the control center, where they found Captain Gonzaga tied up with plastic restraints. After freeing him, they made a distress call, which was intercepted by the USS Philippine Sea. Captain Gonzaga ordered the crew to abandon the ship. As they prepared to evacuate, they realized that Chief Engineer Tabarez was missing. The fire had reached their level, and they could hear the metal buckling from the intense heat. A search party attempted to find Tabarez, but the thick smoke made it impossible, forcing the crew to evacuate in a lifeboat. A helicopter arrived and spotted Tabarez alive on the deck, waving a flashlight. However, the flames were too fierce for an aerial rescue, so he leapt into the sea and was eventually rescued by a Navy boat from a nearby U.S. Navy cruiser. Therefore, an entire industry of individuals jumps into action when a huge commercial vessel is destroyed or badly damaged. The reason for this is that a damaged commercial vessel, which may be carrying goods valued at $300 million or more, could also be worth $100 million or more. Above all, it is a liability. The value of the insurance coverage for that vessel may be in the millions of dollars. Maritime surveyors are therefore among the first individuals called upon in the event of a major maritime catastrophe. Additionally, there was an excellent maritime surveyor in the case of the Brillante Virtuoso. David Mockett is a maritime surveyor who is a self-assured man who resides in Yemen. He's also lived in the neighborhood for a long time, so he knows it extremely well. He is also, a shipping specialist. He has decades of expertise performing this task and was formerly a master mariner in the commercial navy. He travels to the Brillante Virtuoso by hitching a lift aboard a fishing boat. However, he encountered some early difficulties boarding the Brillante. Obtaining authorization took a little while. The way it works is that, usually, a vessel that has been involved in a maritime catastrophe becomes the property of a group known as a salvage team. The outside of the ship is undamaged in heavy seas, but the fire has completely destroyed the interior. While exploring the partially submerged engine room, David Mockett snaps pictures since it is too unsafe to go any farther. Returning to port, he begins to gather information for his report. After seizing possession, pirates don't abandon or set fire to expensive ships. Rather, they take them and demand a ransom. Mockett talks to friends about his suspicions. The evidence is incongruous. The only thing he can think of that might set off an explosion in flames is rocket-propelled grenades, which pirates occasionally employ. But there are no signs of them around. The fire was allegedly sparked by an RPG. David didn't see any proof of this. The fact that the pirate attack had happened in the middle of the night, when Somali pirates usually don't operate, perplexed him. Usually, they would attack during the day. Again, this is part of the account, but he didn't see any bullet holes, gunshot residue, or other such proof. He therefore lacked a plausible hypothesis for what had happened. All he could do was suspect that there was more to it than the first reports revealed. Additionally, the salvage crew's demeanor struck him as a little odd when he came and chatted with them. One evening when they sat down to dine, David Mockett was being questioned by the salvers about his activities in a location like Yemen. It is difficult to think that a seasoned captain would allow armed individuals to board his ship in hazardous waters if there was any doubt about who they were. The entire narrative seems questionable. In an email, David Mockett expresses his worries and millions of dollars in guaranteed claims at Lloyd's based on his findings. He thinks that the pirates from Somalia are, in reality, dishonest Yemeni Coast Guard or naval personnel. He says he'll provide additional details soon. The following day, a bomb explodes beneath David Mockett's seat as he is driving from his workplace to his residence for lunch. It blows his door off its hinges and quickly kills him. His body is flung from the vehicle and lands on the road by the damaged door. Was David Mockett the target of the bomber's desire to murder him? As it happens, whenever a British national is killed overseas, the British government did respond in some capacity. The Foreign Office made an effort to find out the specifics of what had happened. Ultimately, not much could be done by the British government. The Met Police dispatched an investigator to Aden to coordinate with the Yemeni police. Following David Mockett's death, an inquest was held, and the coroner concluded that the man had been unlawfully slain. However, he was unsure of the perpetrator. At that inquiry, there was evidence that he had been targeted because he was about to disclose a criminal conspiracy, but there was no proof as to who had killed him. But after that discovery, nothing happened. No police action, no thorough investigation. It was like the whole thing was just swept under the rug. The only thing that remained was an insurance dispute. You see, when a massive vessel like the Brillante Virtuoso is destroyed, or in this case practically destroyed, the insurance companies are left facing a huge payout, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. The vessel itself, in this instance, was valued at around $80 million. Additionally, since the oil on board was insured individually from the vessel itself, there was $100 million in cargo insurance. Even for huge insurance businesses, this is a significant problem. It's quite improbable that they will try to argue with you in court. But in the instance of Brillante Virtuoso, these London insurers chose to battle it out in court after considering the facts around what had happened and the enormous sum they were confronted with. They made the decision to refuse to pay the claimant because they didn't think it was an authentic act of piracy. Thus, it establishes the framework for this high-stakes litigation in London, which ends up being our finest opportunity to comprehend what actually transpired here. Any evidence of what truly happened to the ship was completely destroyed. The Brillante Virtuoso was eventually sent to a scrapyard where it was dismantled and torn to pieces, erasing any physical proof of the events that transpired. This left the insurers with an enormous challenge. To prove that this was an act of fraud rather than piracy, they needed substantial evidence. However, with the ship in pieces, gathering that proof became almost impossible. When you're trying to invalidate an insurance claim worth nearly $80 million in court, you need an overwhelming amount of evidence, something that was becoming increasingly difficult to obtain as time passed and evidence vanished. One of the crucial steps in unraveling this mystery was to hire private investigators. In this case, two experienced investigators, Richard Veal and Michael Connor, were brought on board. Their task was to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding the destruction of the Brillante Virtuoso and the tragic fate of David Mockett. Their task was to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding the destruction of the Brillante Virtuoso and the tragic fate of David Mockett. As they delved into the case, they uncovered layers of intrigue, exposing more questions than answers about what truly happened. Additionally, they were carrying out the tasks that were to be completed as soon as possible after the incident, including tracking down the sailors, maritime authorities, and witnesses to the attack so that they could be interviewed and have their accounts obtained. Working with the salvage team, one of the whistleblowers who came out to reveal the truth about the fraud on the Brillante Virtuoso arrived at the scene not long after the attack. He watched while the salvage team made sure the ship was fully wrecked, the fire didn't go out, and there was a greater likelihood that the insurance scam would succeed. However, he saw all of these things happen since he was stationed in Yemen, knew the salvage captain, and had been acquainted with the ship owner for several months. He witnessed what had been planned. He was aware that a ship would enter the Yemeni seas, be assaulted, and be the victim of an insurance scam gone bad. He had information that the insurance investigators and the police needed desperately. But by disclosing it, he endangered his life. The Greek whistleblower was accompanied by police officers from an unidentified location when he testified in court. They also managed to track down and interview a crew member who later confessed that he had fabricated his original story. He revealed that he had done so under duress, having been threatened by Marios Iliopoulos. This admission was a significant breakthrough in the investigation. By carefully piecing together this confession with other gathered evidence, the investigators were able to compile a compelling case. They believed this evidence was strong enough to challenge the insurance claim and expose the truth behind the incident. Marios Iliopoulos was charged by the Talbert Insurance Syndicate in 2015 for masterminding an attack on the Brillante Virtuoso. They assert that the owner and crew members were involved in staging the attack. The insurers assert that a bomb meant to upset the ship caused the fire. Talbert points to the assertions made by Sailor that are inconsistent. The crew eventually revised their account to state that the shooter had claimed to be from the government, which answered the question of how Somali pirates might have known the tanker had been anticipating an escort. Initially, the crew claimed the assailants were their security team. The insurers claimed that the Brillante Virtuoso was losing money and that Iliopoulos was heavily in debt. Talbert said that Iliopoulos orchestrated the tanker ship's demolishment. Marios Iliopoulos refuted the claims and charged that his reputation was being jeopardized by the insurers. In April 2016, Iliopoulos found himself in a London courtroom for a pre-trial hearing. Lawyers accused him of withholding crucial evidence and even hacking their agents' emails in Greece. On the stand, instead of defending himself, Iliopoulos issued a veiled threat, warning of consequences for the accusations. The judge wasn't having any of it and cautioned him to behave. Following the hearing, Iliopoulos was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud. He was taken to the police station, questioned, and then released without charges. Despite his efforts, Iliopoulos never saw a dime of the $100 million he was after. The judge denied his claim, noting in his judgment that when Iliopoulos lost his temper and threatened the insurers and their legal representatives, he lost any shred of credibility he had left. The mystery surrounding David Mockett's death remains unsolved to this day. Investigator Topman, dispatched to uncover the truth, admitted that the list of suspects could include anyone, from common criminals and terrorists to even government officials. The possibility of the UK prosecuting Mockett's murder was always a distant hope. After all, the crime took place in a remote region far beyond Britain's reach and jurisdiction, making justice an elusive goal in this tragic case. During this legal dispute, the bank that had lent Iliopoulos the money to purchase the Brillante Virtuoso wiped off the debt, believing it would never be recouped. This was one of the things that transpired. Thus, in terms of debt, he was clean. He managed to escape debts estimated to be between $60 and $70 million by setting the ship on fire, even though the ship was losing a significant amount of money and nearing the end of its useful life. The Brillante Virtuoso's final journey ended at Gadani Beach in Pakistan, where it met its end, being torn apart by workers earning just a few bucks a day. As for Iliopoulos, he's still wheeling and dealing in the Greek shipping world, with his hands in ferries and tankers registered through a maze of shadowy companies.